Okay, we're back, and so now we want to talk about how can a river erode. And so the first mechanism is going to be dissolution, which is the dissolving of a rock. And so we've already mentioned that limestone, when you subject it to acidic water, is going to dissolve. It's going to break down into calcium ions and then carbonate ions, and then both of those can be transported further downstream by the water. So that's going to be dissolving. Okay, another way that a river can erode is by lifting. And so an example of this in terms of air would be an airplane wing. So if this is a picture of an airplane wing, let's assume that the wind, the air, is coming from this direction, and some of the air goes this way, and then some of the air goes this way. Okay, notice that the air has to travel a further distance. So let's use the letter R for distance. And I'm going to make a big R because it's traveling a further distance going this way than it is going underneath it. So I'll use a little r down here. Now, the wind takes the same amount of time to go this way as it does this way. So that means that if we take the distance divided by time, that's the speed. So that the wind going over the top of the airplane wing is going to have a larger velocity than going underneath it. Okay, now from physics, there is a thing called Bernoulli's equation, which relates the speed at which the wind is traveling to the pressure acting on the airplane wing. So we've talked about pressure before, and we said it was a force divided by an area. So it turns out that the faster the wind flows over the top, the smaller the pressure is going to be going over the top, and then the larger the pressure is going to be underneath it. And now this pressure is pushing upwards, and this pressure is pushing downwards. And notice that since there's a net pressure underneath it, it's going to lift the airplane wing. And so this is the principle of lift for an airplane. The wings produce lift that lifts the plane. So now let's relate this to a rock. So let's pretend instead of this being an airplane wing, let's assume that this is a rock. And so that this rock could be resting on the bed of the channel, and then as the water flows over the top of it, it also is going to produce a pressure. And so if the pressure pushing down on it is going to be less than the pressure pushing up on it, the net effect is that this rock could be lifted up by the force of the water flowing over the top of it. So that's going to be called lifting. Okay, then you've got scouring. And so scouring is going to occur when water flows past an obstacle, such as a rock, or in the picture shown there, a concrete bridge. So that's the base of a concrete bridge, and what's happened is water has flowed around that base, and it has carried away loose materials from around it, and so now you got this big hole underneath that concrete, and so that could cause that bridge to fail. But scouring is going to be when water is going to flow around any kind of an obstacle, so it could be a rock, and then it's going to carry away loose material that is around that rock. Okay, then you've got breaking, which is what the water itself can do. So even if the water has no rocks that are flowing in it, just the force of the impact of the water itself can cause materials to break down. And then finally we've got abrasion, which is the force of the impact of the materials that are in the water. so that the water could be carrying sand that could impact rocks. It could be carrying pebbles that could impact on rocks. Even silt and clay can impact on a rock and cause abrasion. A particular example of abrasion is going to be called a pothole. And so what happens is that in a river, due to irregularities in the rock, sometimes the water will begin to swirl. And as it swirls, pebbles and things like that can start to erode into a rock that is underneath the whirlpool. And so that's how you get these potholes in the middle of a river. All right, so let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how does a river transport.